Pleasure to be here. It's an honor. Really appreciate everyone's hospitality. And what I wanted to briefly talk about this afternoon was work we're doing with the Montclair Descendants Committee on honoring the ancestors, most especially through memorialization project that's underway right now. And to give you some context of where Montclair is, have this map showing the location of Montpelier in relationship to other Virginia cities, and most importantly Stratford Hall here. We're in a similarly rural location as Stratford, and there's challenges with that. And what most people, for 20 years have recognized as Montpelier is, the main house that we restored back in 2008, and then this little symbol for the Montpelier Foundation. More recently, we are now starting, beginning last year at this exact time, we're now under co-stewardship with the Montclair Descendants Committee. And this is, an outgrowth of years of work for many of y'all in the room, especially Dr. Blakey, many descendants that are here as well. And one of the first things under co-stewardship and with parity that the MDC has looked at is to begin memorialization of the burial ground. And one of the aspects of this that's guided this, as I look at Dr. Blakey here, is the clientage model. And part of what really has brought strength to what we're doing at Montpelier is our concept of descendant communities. I'm wearing my t-shirt today is my other role at the Orange County African American Historical Society. And at Montpelier, the Montpelier Descendants Committee, recognizes that the vast majority of descendants are associated with Montpelier. There are connections with other plantation communities across the area. And one of those is the plantations communities, the descendant communities that are along what's called the Southwest Mountain Chain that goes from Montpelier down to Monticello. And the folks that are buried at Montpelier, while they would have been owned by the owners, the enslavers at Montpelier, they had relatives at these other locations. So there were family lines across kind of this area. And then also extend along river systems that go from Montpelier to Plaquemine down to Fredericksburg, and then at this side from Charlottesville to James down to Richmond. So there's an extensive community network that really underlies the MDC. And one of the things that really also gives strength to this in terms of the relationship between the MDC and Montpelier, the Montpelier Foundation today, what makes what is Montpelier, or we refer to as Montpelier today, as a combination of these two organizations, both of which are nonprofits, 501(c)(3)s, their own board of governance, independent decision making, is Dr. Blakey's clientage model. And the clientage model, as Dr. Blakey described it, is how these different groups work together. But most importantly, and what is something that is really, it needs to be emphasized, is this ethical client, which in terms of this relationship is the Montpelier Descendant Committee. The Montpelier Descendant Committee has the essentially the veto on any kind of actions that really speak to their identity, and that's the interpretation of what is the enslaved community at Montpelier, how we do research, how we do represent the enslaved community, and by extension descendants in our interpretive work. And this is something that's guiding us most especially in memorialization work and the work we're doing in the burial ground, but extends to all 2,650 acres at Montpelier. So for the burial ground, for years the burial ground is that area of a wooded area down the hill from the visitor center, and initially was recognized as an area of around 38 depressions, which was marked by typical of these plantations, black. And when you think about a community at any one time that would have over 100 individuals, there is no way that a burial ground of just 38 individuals represents the extensive burials that would be in this location. And so one of the things that we did about 8 years ago in collaboration with the MDC, which had not been formed just yet, is we did a ground penetrating radar survey of this area. And what we found is that this, the area of burials was way beyond these 38 graves. It was upwards of a 2-acre area with over 250 burials. So this is more along the size that you would expect for any plantation the size of Montpelier or Stratford plantation. And there is a strong tradition among African American communities to have a single home place at these home site burials to be in one location. And so while we found other burial grounds at Montpelier, what today is 2,650 acres, we're learning that those are associated with adjacent plantations that today, encompasses the property, but at the time were not, owned by the Montpelier enslavers. So what we're doing with this is, when you look at the Montpelier burial ground in relationship to really the built environment, is, there's two aspects of the built environment that visitors come to see. One is the burial place of James Madison, father of the Constitution, at the Madison Family Cemetery. It's marked by a brick wall, and from GPR surveys, we found it defines the extent of that burial ground. It was built there in 1810 to protect the burials of the Madison family for being plowed, which is very different from the burial ground, the Montpelier burial ground. The other thing that marks Montpelier is this standard house with the 4 white columns. So when you come up the drive, that's what you see. And one of the first acts of the MDC, one of their first goals was to begin to represent their ancestral burial ground. Now that we knew it was in one site, if you're a descendant of any families from Montpelier, you knew where your ancestors were buried, is to begin to find a way to really give prominence to this space. And one of the first applications that the MDC and Montpelier worked on, Montpelier as a whole worked on, was a grant from the Mellon Foundation for Mellon Monuments. And we just recently received this $5.7 million to memorialize the ancestors' burial place at Montpelier. And so what's exciting about this is, for visitors coming up the driveway at Montpelier, this is my horrible version of an eye if you're looking up at the main house. What's prominent for the main entrance of Montpelier is, of course, the columns of the main house, but also this woodlot right here is the burial ground. So what we're looking to do is begin to memorialize this space. And one of the first things we're looking at with this is archaeological survey. And with the archaeological survey, this is going to take the course of about at least 3 years. We're starting with surveys this year. And one of the things that we've recognized, and this is, probably very common amongst all these spaces, especially spaces where burials began to be placed there in the 18th century, and they're in areas that weren't as prominent for agriculture, that there's just incredible survivals in the vegetation. And we recently, the tiny picture down here is a picture of, we started to do a vegetation survey of this 4-acre woodlot. And what we discovered is indicator species that show that much of this area has been undisturbed, has never had agricultural production on it. And there's also literally, plant resources that have monetary value that are indicator species of a well-preserved area. And there's the potential for, that the archaeology, we're not beginning underground, we're beginning above ground and looking at what that vegetation is. Is there evidence of how this space was memorialized, say if you visited here in 1820? And so what we're looking to do is really we want to understand this space not from a bioarchaeology space, but from a space of memorialization for how the enslaved community honored their loved ones when they passed away and were buried in the ground. What does that space look like? And then also for developing a memorial, where is the burial space? Where does that space begin and end? So that a memorial that can be, in terms of hard landscaping, be built that doesn't impact that area. And if it does, the MDC is making this decision. And I'll get back to the clientage model in this. But what our plans for the survey are, one of the first steps, and this includes many people in the audience. Rebecca Davis here is heading up the oral history project. Much like the archaeology of these spaces, oftentimes what is not visible is seen as not present. And this, gets into, some of the erasure that's happened, like Dr. Jackson was talking about. You go from erasure of information to it being absent and then just completely ignored. Oral histories is one of those. What Rebecca Davis is finding right now is that there are some of the black families that lived at Montpelier in the 20th century have memories of this burial ground, despite the fact that the last burials here were potentially placed before the Civil War. Simply having a memory of the burial ground being present meant that probably these folks that remembered it had individuals they knew who were buried here. And what is some of the memorialization that could have happened, not just in the 18th and 19th century, but in the 20th century, the early 20th century, individuals visiting their loved ones. What could be placed there? And what was essentially at that time was a white space, because this was owned by the DuPont families who in the mid-20th century were prominent horse breeders, and it was not a safe space. It was a Jim Crow space. And so with this oral history, one thing that we're going to be looking at is doing metal detector surveys in the burial ground. And this is included in remote sensing. We're considering metal detecting as remote sensing. That's why I put that in my bio, because the metal detector surveys that we do, it is one of the few ways you can find these ephemeral spaces of the black Americans that built Montpelier. The homes, often cases, the barns aren't evident through standard archaeological survey practices. It's only using a metal detector and finding scatters of nails that you can figure out where, say, a fence is or a road is. And one of the things we're excited about in this burial ground, if I flip back to this past slide here, is within this area that's with the dotted lines, is there a possibility of having fence lines that would have denoted the extent of the burial ground? Is there a way to do a minimal amount of archaeology to define the extent of the burial ground? So we're doing a number of things to test first before doing excavation units. One of the other things that we're doing is that many of you all have talked about today is various remote sensing techniques, ground penetrating radar with different radar units, also different magnetometer surveys. And then finally, what we're going to be doing is doing community-led research through archaeology. And we're actually beginning this today, this season at the home farm with Dr. Blakey and Dr. Iris Ford as our academic advisors for this process. And so with a community-led archaeology, what that means is not just inviting the community to take part in the excavations and the research, but have the community be a vital part of developing research questions like Dr. Blakey was talking about, looking for grants that have the descendant community be part of the staffing of the archaeology department, so there's no advisory role, there's a full partnership role. And of course, the final part of all this is going to be in the development of the memorial itself. And today, Henry Anglin, who's in the picture right here, taking a picture of another one of the memorialization subcommittee members, Joanne Brock. The memorialization subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Montpelier Descendants Committee, and they're developing the ideas for the memorial along with Allison James, who's sitting between Dr. Ford and Mr. Anglin. So part of this, what the memorialization is really going to be based on is this clientage model. And in this case, the project is going to be memorialization that encompasses not just the building of the memorial, which is an interpretive and an honoring act, a memorialization act, but also the research. And so the profession, this is archaeologists, museum professionals, and architects. This group up here is not designed to be giving answers, it's designed to be giving services. And so in this, who is going to be influencing this is the role of the business client, the Montpelier Foundation, is to raise the money in partnership with the MDC. The role of the ethical client is to guide this process to make sure it's done in the most ethical and way that honors their ancestral legacy as much as possible.
and having a full veto right in the entire process. And what makes this possible is the whole process of parity that we went through, where we have a board makeup for the Montpelier Foundation board that's made up of equal numbers of descendant chosen board members. So with this, we welcome you all to follow our progress in this and look forward to your all's questions. So thank you.